Welcome, dear souls, who sometimes find yourselves bewildered by the paradox of love. Perhaps more than once, we have witnessed or even experienced ourselves a painful truth that love, care, and sacrifice given unconditionally can inadvertently cultivate an ungrateful spirit. What causes a seed of kindness, when watered excessively, to sprout into indifference, entitlement, and ultimately, ingratitude? Is this a cruel law of life or an invisible trap that we unconsciously set? Ingratitude, in the sense we contemplate today, isn't an innate flaw, but a psychological state, a consequence of an imbalanced flow of energy in how we give and receive. In these moments, we will explore 5 profound reasons, 5 mirrors reflecting aspects we often overlook, showing how spoiling inadvertently creates ungrateful souls. These are not judgments, but philosophies of life drawn from the depths of human experience and the flow of the universe. The first reason spoiling creates ungrateful people is that the soul is not allowed to experience hardship and struggle. When every obstacle is cleared, every desire is met instantly, an individual never has the chance to develop inner strength, resilience, and the ability to persevere. They live within a false shell of safety, never understanding the value of effort and sacrifice. Real-life example. A child is excessively shielded by their parents, never having to do their own homework or face small failures in school or with friends. All their problems are solved for them. As they grow up and face real-life challenges, they easily give up, feel the world is unfair, and believe others are responsible for helping them. They don't understand that success requires perseverance, and that failure is a teacher. Because they never had to strive for anything, they feel no gratitude for what they have. Philosophical analysis. The growth of a soul often comes from friction, from the scars of experience. Osho often said, "Life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced." When we are stripped of difficult experiences, we are stripped of the opportunity to deeply understand the value of effort, perseverance, and the things that are given to us. Spoiling creates the illusion that everything is easily obtained, that everyone is responsible for serving us. This nurtures an entitled ego, incapable of seeing the effort and sacrifice of others. Without the comparison of having to struggle for something, gratitude cannot sprout. The safe shell of spoiling, instead of protecting, inadvertently weakens the soul, making it fragile, easily broken, and lacking the capacity for genuine gratitude. The second reason spoiling creates ungrateful people is that the individual loses their ability for self-reliance and becomes completely dependent on others. When every need is met without any effort from themselves, a person never develops a sense of personal responsibility, self-mastery, or the ability to solve their own problems. They come to believe that the world owes them a living. Example. Class. An adult still fully depends on their parents for finances, a job, and even the smallest decisions in life. They have never learned to manage money, seek employment, or take care of themselves. When their parents are no longer able or willing to provide, they feel abandoned, angry, and blame their parents for no longer serving them, instead of recognizing their own lack of independence. This dependence transforms love into a burden and gratitude into a demand. Philosophical analysis. An individual's growth, according to Carl Jung, is a process of individuation, which requires confronting the world and developing one's own capabilities. When spoiling takes away this process, it creates an immature ego, incapable of self-mastery. Krishnamurti often spoke of how true freedom comes from not being dependent on anything. Total dependence on others not only weakens one's will, but also nurtures a deep-seated sense of helplessness and silent resentment. The spoiled person feels that provision is an inherent right, not a gift. When that right is threatened, they react with anger and ingratitude because they have never tasted the feeling of creating value for themselves. They are bound by the invisible chains of dependence, and it is precisely these chains that make them ungrateful to those who created them. The third reason spoiling creates ungrateful people is that the individual takes everything for granted, with no gratitude for what they receive. When every need is met instantly, without waiting or sacrifice, the concept of value or a gift gradually disappears. All provision becomes a default right, something to be expected rather than appreciated. Example. Class. A child is constantly bought the most expensive toys, taken on luxurious trips, and fed the best food without having to do anything to deserve it. When they receive a gift, they might just glance at it without saying thank you, or even immediately demand something else. As they grow up, they take others' help for granted, never appreciating the effort or sacrifice of those who help them. They don't understand the value of giving because they have never experienced the feeling of scarcity. Philosophical analysis. Gratitude is a profound quality that arises from recognizing the value of what we receive and understanding the effort of the giver. Krishnamurti often spoke of choiceless awareness to see the truth of all things. When spoiling obscures this vision, it creates an invisible veil, preventing the soul from seeing the preciousness of things that seem small. Taking everything for granted not only weakens gratitude but also nurtures an entitled and perpetually dissatisfied ego. The spoiled person will always feel a sense of lack, no matter how much they are given, because they lack the ability to appreciate what they have. They live in a cycle of dissatisfaction, constantly seeking new things to fill an empty void. To escape this ingratitude, one must learn to pause, reflect, and appreciate the smallest things in life. Gratitude is the key to unlocking the door to contentment and true happiness. The fourth reason spoiling creates ungrateful people is that the ego becomes excessively inflated and needs become infinite. When every desire is met without limits, the ego grows, believing it is the center of the universe, and everyone is obligated to fulfill its every demand. Needs become endless, impossible to satisfy, leaving no one able to please them. Example. Class. A person who was spoiled from a young age, always having their every request, no matter how unreasonable, granted. As an adult, they become selfish, only caring about themselves, unwilling to compromise or share. They always demand the best, cannot accept rejection, and will react with anger and resentment if they don't get their way. They believe they deserve everything without having to put in effort or sacrifice. Philosophical analysis. Carl Jung spoke of the puer aeternus, the eternal child, or puella aeterna, the eternal girl, an ego that refuses to mature, always wanting to live in a state of being protected and having everything provided without responsibility. When the ego is inflated, it creates an illusion of grandiosity, but in reality, it conceals a deep-seated insecurity. Osho often said that the ego is a falsehood, and only when we transcend it can we find true peace. The infinite needs of an inflated ego cannot be filled by any amount of provision. The more they are given, the more they demand, because the emptiness within is not due to a lack of material things, but a lack of connection to their authentic self. This leads to perpetual dissatisfaction and ingratitude, because no one can ever fill a bottomless pit. To break free from this cycle, one must recognize and soften the demanding ego, seek value from within, and not depend on external gratification. The fifth reason spoiling creates ungrateful people is that the individual loses the ability to empathize and understand the suffering of others. When a person is constantly shielded from all hardship, pain, and lack, they find it difficult to imagine what others must go through to obtain things that seem simple. This lack of experience creates an invisible wall, separating them from the rich emotional world of humanity. Example. Class. A person spoiled from childhood who never had to worry about money or work. When they see others struggling to make a living, they might make callous remarks like, "Why don't you just try harder?" or "What's so difficult about that?" without ever understanding the burdens and pressures the other person is enduring. They cannot feel the sacrifice of their parents, loved ones, or those who help them because they have never tasted the feeling of lack or had to struggle for what they have. Philosophical analysis. Compassion and empathy are profound qualities that arise from connecting with the pain and joy of others. Krishnamurti often spoke of the necessity of choiceless awareness to see the truth of all things, including the suffering of others. When spoiling creates an overly protected environment, it inadvertently paralyzes the ability to empathize, leaving the soul alienated from the basic human experience. The spoiled person often lives within a narrow worldview where they are the center, and everything serves them. They cannot see the sacrifice and hardship of others, and therefore cannot appreciate what they are given. This leads to ingratitude, because they don't understand the true value of what they receive. To escape this ingratitude, one needs the courage to step out of their comfort zone, to experience the world more authentically, and to listen to the stories of others' pain and resilience. When you open your heart to the world, you will find deep connection, and gratitude will naturally blossom within your soul. Dear friends, spoiling is not a sin, but an act of love that is sometimes misplaced. But when that love inadvertently creates an ungrateful soul, that's when we need to reflect. Ingratitude isn't an innate trait, but a result of seeds sown in an environment lacking in challenges, self-reliance, gratitude, and empathy. Remember, each of us has the ability to transform. The important thing is not to blame, but to dare to face the patterns that have formed and dare to change how we give and receive. Osho said, "Life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced." Where will you begin your journey to cultivate a grateful soul? Will you allow yourself and others to experience challenges, nurture self-reliance, practice gratitude, soften the ego, or open your heart to empathy? Share your reflections and feelings in the comments below. Thank you for joining us. May you always find peace and profound tranquility within your soul, and may love always blossom into sincere gratitude.